वैष्णव जन को प्रेम कहिए जे, पीर पराई जाने। वैष्णव जन को प्रेम कहिए जे, पीर पराई जाने। पर दुखे उपकार करे तो ये, पर दुखे उपकार करे तो ये, मन अभिमान लाने। वैष्णव जन को प्रेम कहिए जे, पीर पराई जाने। सकल लोक मान सहुर वंदे, निंदा न करे घेणी रे। सकल लोक मान सहुर वंदे, निंदा न करे घेणी रे। वाच काच मन निष्ठल राखे, वाच काच मन निष्ठल राखे। धन धन जननी तेरी। वैष्णव जन को प्रेम कहिए जे, पीर पराई जाने। समदृष्टि में तृष्णा त्यागी, परस्त्री जेने मात रे। समदृष्टि में तृष्णा त्यागी, परस्त्री जेने मात रे। जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले, जिह्वा थकी असत्य न बोले। पर धन नाम झाले हाथ। वैष्णव जन को प्रेम कहिए जे, पीर पराई जाने। माया व्यापे नहीं जेने, दृढ़ वैराग्य जेना मन मारे। माया व्यापे नहीं जेने, दृढ़ वैराग्य जेना मन मारे। राम नाम छूताड़ी लागी, राम नाम छूताड़ी लागी। सकल तीरथ तेना मारे। वैष्णव जन को प्रेम कहिए जे, पीर पराई जाने। लोभी में कपट रहित छे, काम क्रोध निवार्या रे। लोभी में कपट रहित छे, काम क्रोध निवार्या रे। बड़े नर सयो तेरू दर्शन करता, बड़े नर सयो तेरू दर्शन करता। बड़े को तेरू आया। कृष्ण भजन को तेने कहिए जय, पीर पराई जान दे। वैष्णव जन को तेने कहिए जय, पीर पराई जान दे। परम दुखे उपकार करे तो ये, परम दुखे उपकार करे तो ये, मन अभिमान रे। कृष्ण भजन को तेने कहिए जय, पीर पराई जान दे। कृष्ण भजन को तेने कहिए जय।
Namaskar and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. Kasturba Gandhi's contribution in making Mohan into the Mahatma, a sacrifice and suffering, and inspiring thousands of women to fight against injustice and racial discrimination in South Africa and in the freedom struggle in India is extraordinary. I pay my humble obeisance to the Matru Shakti, to all the women who comprise 50% of the world's population. I express my deep gratitude to the Embassy of India in Khartoum, in Sudan, for hosting the Gandhi Katha amidst these challenging times of coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic to learn from Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means, his spirituality, his practices of health and wellness of body, mind, and spirit for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the COVID 19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On 2nd October, the world celebrates the UN International Day of Nonviolence and Gandhi Jayanti. The entire world is remembering Mahatma Gandhi, the apostle of peace and nonviolence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I pay my respects to the leading lights of Sudan and convey my warm wishes to all the people of Sudan and especially those who have joined me online today. We stand in solidarity with you all in our common fight against the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic. Al Sadiq Al Mahdi, former Prime Minister of Sudan, called Gandhiji a humanist saint, and that Gandhi's biography is the role model for humanity. Sudan Postal Authority issued postage stamps to mark the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, and these were released by the Director General of Sudan Post. Embassy of India in Sudan has held many activities for promoting Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy during this period. One of the major activities was the Satyavarta or truthful talk. Speaking in this episode, Dr. Babikir Muhammad Toum, former Minister of Parliament and Chair of Parliamentary Economic Committee, said, and I quote, "The legacy of Mahatma Gandhi was not like any other man or political activist. More peaceful means to win your cause is relevant today. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narration. I have given talks in Gandhi Katha in 94 countries during these 2 years. In all the countries, people have great respect and relevance for Mahatma Gandhi. Many have been inspired by him to take up the cudgels against injustice through nonviolence. Others have followed his environmental credo, and still others have been deeply touched by his simple spiritual life. The humanism of the world's thought leaders are so deeply reflected in Mahatma Gandhi's teachings. The new generation is eager to understand more about this greatest man of the last century who made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many leaders such as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Father Desmond Tutu, Father Kunz, Saint Teresa, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, Caesar Chavez, George Bernard Shaw, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and many others. Today, in the field of international conflict resolution, people are interested in the effectiveness of peaceful means for ending disputes, as demonstrated by Mahatma Gandhi compared with the use of force or nonviolence. In peace building context, scholars and practitioners are seeking to integrate authentic, indigenous, and local cultural methods of conflict analysis and intervention. People are finding inspiration in Mahatma Gandhi's ideals and his lifelong effort of peace building and conflict resolution through interfaith dialogues for establishing harmony and brotherhood. Throughout his life, Mahatma Gandhi engaged in finding solutions through these dialogues. He had deep respect for world religion and developed lifelong friendship with people from different religions. He took time to study, reflect, and engage with different faiths and faith communities. During his lifetime, Gandhiji read the Holy Quran more than once and also books on Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It made a deep impression on him that Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, often fasted and prayed, and he had revelations not in the moments of ease and luxurious living, but when he fasted and prayed, kept awake for nights together, and would be on his feet at all hours of the night as he received revelations. Mahatma Gandhi cultivated respect for Islam. To Gandhiji, the central teaching of the Holy Quran remained that of peace. He regarded Islam as a religion of peace. He found Muslims to be brave, generous, and trusting. He sought to gain Muslim friendship through love. His ultimate remedy was to deal with the wrong but not to hurt the wrongdoer. Thus, to him, the ultimate answer lay in the concept of live and let live, or mutual forbearance and toleration in life. He said that this is the lesson he had learned from the Holy Quran. Mahatma Gandhi used to start and end his day with prayers, and these were prayers from all the religions of the world. In the ashrams that he had established, every activity and program used to begin and end with prayers, and Gandhiji's unshakable faith in universal brotherhood is reflected in his fascination from the hymns from the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, and the Holy Quran that proclaimed the power of truth. in all the religious prayers that Gandhi ji used to sing in the ashram. Al Fatiha and Surah Al Ikhlas used to be recited daily in the morning and evening, and I have grown up reciting these. Gandhiji said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, and tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence and have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions and cultural backgrounds from around the world. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through non-violence throughout his life till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, non-violence, and purity of means has inspired me to give Gandhi Katha so that people can put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji, get inspired by his extraordinary ethical and moral leadership, his simple spiritual life, the revolutionary thoughts, his actions, his lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice, and how he continues to inspire people in all the parts of the globe at all times and in all ages. Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. The faith gave him the constant awareness that he was to be nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and form. And before him, all the great teachers of the world had already walked on that path. Two, he had to constantly gaze inwards and find inspiration through self introspection, self examination, and self purification. He did this by repeated questioning, by humble service, and that question was Ko Aham, who am I? What am I? And what is the purpose of my life? This question has been asked in our ancient Indian civilization since the past 5,000 years. To Gandhiji, the answer came that the purpose of life was to serve others. The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Mahatma Gandhi. He said that truth is God. Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, then each person was capable of being truthful, of being good, and doing good to others. The second realization was that in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress in the auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. Gandhiji's endeavor throughout his life was devoted to the search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. Because of this understanding of oneness, Gandhiji had no enemies. He did not want to settle any scores with anyone. He did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love and respect compassion to everyone. One of the traits that we see in Gandhiji is that he respected individuals as individuals. And this is a very important trait and something to learn from Gandhiji. Arnold Joseph Toynbee, the British leading historian and philosopher of history, had said something remarkable about Gandhiji, and I quote: "The generation into which I happen to have been born has not only been Hitler's generation in the West and Stalin's in Russia, it has also been Gandhi's in India, and it can already be forecast with some confidence that Gandhi's effect on human history is going to be greater and more lasting than Stalin's or Hitler's." Now I will play a hymn, Gandhi Katha hymn in Hindi, which elaborates on Gandhiji's definition of truth as being harmony between thoughts, words, and deed.
मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा।
Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy was primarily truth centered. Truth was the first and foremost principle in Gandhian philosophy. Gandhiji's life was a continuous series of experiments with truth. He applied his philosophy to his own life through selfless service and to practical social and political service through his non-violent civil disobedience campaigns, which he termed as Satyagraha. And that is his first legacy to humanity. To understand Gandhiji's thoughts and philosophy, one must understand him as a whole and not in parts. His thoughts on religion, economics, education, health, society, politics, literature, and culture need to be studied, understood, and adopted according to the context. His life is filled with many kinds of challenges, solutions, and achievements. He used truth as an experiment not only in politics but also in his personal life too. For Gandhiji, truth is the relative truth of truthfulness in thought, word, and deed. And the absolute truth was the ultimate reality. The ultimate truth is God and morality. The moral laws and code, its basis. Nonviolence, far from meaning mere peacefulness or the absence of overt violence, is understood by Gandhiji to denote active love. Gandhiji's nonviolence stems from two main points. First, if according to the divine reality, all life is one, then all violence committed towards another is violence towards oneself, towards the collective, whole self, and thus self destructive and counter to the universal law of life, which is love. Gandhiji believed that non-violence is the most powerful force in existence. Had violence been superior to non-violence, humankind would have long ago have succeeded in destroying itself. The human race certainly could not have progressed as far as it has, even if universal justice remains far off the horizon. From both viewpoints, nonviolence or love is regarded as the highest law of humankind. Another aspect that gave him strength was the clarity that he had acquired from years of experiments and reflection on the philosophical content of Satyagraha. He was clear that Satyagraha was based on the principle of Advaita, of non duality. If the same essence of soul encompasses all human beings, it would allow a Satyagrahi to become one with the oppressor. Any failure to reach reach out and appeal to the oppressor would not be a failure of would be a failure of Satyagrahi and not a shortcoming of the philosophy of Satyagraha. Moreover, with the experience that he had had over the years, he had begun to see love as a very powerful and positive force. The challenge before him was to use this force with effect. The bigger the challenge, the more enthused Gandhiji was by it. Gandhiji realized that untruth, injustice, oppression, and tyranny last only as long as their victims accept them. The moment one learns to say no to injustice, to untruth, their edifice collapses immediately. This was true for the political, the economic, and the social order. Mahatma Gandhi is the greatest apostle of peace the world has seen in the recent times. His notion of peace is focused on tolerance, forgiveness, compassion, oneness, truth force, love force, and soul force. Gandhiji had said, if we have no charity and no tolerance, we shall never be able to settle our differences amicably and must therefore always submit to the arbitration of a third party. Many of today's conflict management techniques and resolution processes have a clear shadow of what and how Gandhiji had seen international issues in his times. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the first half of the 20th century, had called Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme practical leader for change. He had said, and I quote, I believe that Gandhiji's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our time. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non participation in anything you believe is evil. Gandhiji was the conscience keeper of humanity. That his ideas will be an inspiration to us both as individuals and as a society is beyond any doubt. He was an epoch maker, one who could sow the seeds for the next generation from the fruits of the previous one. Mahatma Gandhi is the most powerful visionary and a practical idealist from the first half of the last century, whose life is a role model for us all. But the effort has to begin from a point where you're standing. That is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical, and he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean that he was very busy. Of course, throughout his life, he was very, very busy on so many issues. But what we mean is the action of putting ideas and beliefs into practice more than anything else was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, "An ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching." Mahatma Gandhi has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines as economics, spirituality, conflict resolution, international peace, civil rights, education, politics, society, and more. At that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, modern industrialization, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. Mahatma Gandhi advised to shun these seven social sins in his speech on October 22nd, 1925. Politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without ethics, knowledge without character, pleasure without conscience, science without morality, worship without sacrifice. In my opinion, Mahatma Gandhi's life left the most powerful and strong imprint on the humanity of the world. He had said, "My life is my message." Reginald Arthur Reynolds, the British writer, Quaker, and an anti colonial activist, lived in Gandhiji's Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat from 1929 to 1931. Reynolds was impressed by Gandhiji's vitality, his vision, his honesty, tactical and strategic ability, his charm, his sense of humor, his logical and analytical mind, yet capable of real affection and the scorching passion for truth. I will play the Gandhi Katha dhun in Hindi about Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of meaning.
लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी रे लगन लागी रे लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन लागी लगन लागी लगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन
Time magazine had listed out three most important protests over 190 years. The first one was the Boston Tea Party. The second one was the Dandi March or Salt Satyagraha. And the third was the March of Washington. We can see a common thread in the first and second because these two were against the same company, the East India Company. And there is a common thread of non-violence in all the three protests. In 1930, with a pinch of salt, Mahatma Gandhi shook the world. He started out on 12th March from his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad for Dandi, the seashore town, with 79 fellow marchers. Walked for 24 days, walking 10 miles a day, stopped at 48 villages, covering 241 miles, till he reached Dandi, the seashore town, on 5th of April. On 6th April early morning, when he picked up a fistful of muddy lump of earth with salt, 100,000 people joined him towards them. And towards the end of the campaign, 300,000 people broke the salt law all over India. 1,362 newspapers covered the news worldwide. So he remains the most powerful global brand ambassador of peace and nonviolence, a youth icon, apostle of peace and nonviolence, a man whose values can make the world a better place today. In 1904, in South Africa, after reading John Ruskin's book, Unto This Last, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi transformed his life and started leading a community life of poverty, self control, bread labor, and Sarvodaya or welfare of all. He established 4 ashrams in his lifetime, 2 in South Africa called Phoenix Settlement in 1904 and Tolstoy Farm in 1910, and 2 ashrams in India in 1917, the Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, and the Sevagram Ashram in 1936, which was in Wardha, Maharashtra. Here in Sevagram Ashram is the place where Kasturba Gandhi and Mahatma Gandhi lived in poverty like the common villagers of India. Ashram life was his ideal of a non-violent face-to-face society for the welfare of all and carrying out constructive programs. And this is his second gift to humanity. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary satyagrahis, for offering the highest sacrifice in the freedom struggle on one hand and get involved in the constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor, to establish their self respect and dignity. So, this ashram, which was his ideal of a non-violent face-to-face society, was for welfare of all, self-reliance, cleanliness, and service to humanity, for realizing his vision of village republic. I am happy to inform you that I was born in his last ashram, the Sevagram ashram. My father was inspired by Gandhiji since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle in India and lived in the Sevagram ashram. Even after Gandhiji passed on in 1948, for more than 5 decades, my parents and all of us have continued to walk on the path that Gandhiji has shown to humanity. So, what I'm telling you today is based on my understanding and experience of Mahatma Gandhi. The life and thoughts of Gandhiji are intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society, and his constructive program was integral to his politics. The unique practices of Mahatma Gandhi, his control of palate, his fasts, his spinning, his silence, and his prayers gave him internal strength, which were as much part of his politics as of his spiritual life. These practices and experiments were sustained and nurtured by the ashram community that he founded. The ashram community, through its own practices, affirmed, modified, and validated Gandhiji's ideals and practices, and continues to do so even till today. This points to the relevance of his practices. He also carried on his experiments in health and wellness through nature cure in the ashrams, through diet control, hydrotherapy, sun bath, mud packs, and observing silence for one whole day. Our friend and the British Quaker Sir Horace Alexander lived in Gandhiji's ashram for a long time, and he observed that the bell used to ring for 56 times in the ashrams. He said, and I quote, Gandhi had a wonderful courtesy and punctuality. I was to learn quickly that he was the slave of watch. He had more to do in every 24 hours than almost any other man. So he had learned how to pack the most into every minute. Yet he never gave the impression of being hurried and impatient. Gandhiji has given three gifts to humanity, and that is Satyagraha, second is constructive program, and third is the Ekadasha Vrata, about which many people do not know, or the 11 observances, which were a set of rules set by him for the ashram inmates for spiritual progress and voluntary self discipline. Ivan Illich, the Croatian Austrian philosopher who came to Sevagram ashram in 1978, sat in the cottage where Gandhiji used to live, which was a very simple hut, which is called Bapu Kuti, for a long time, and said, and I quote, the hut of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness which we can derive from practicing the principles of simplicity, service, and truthfulness. Now I'll play the Gandhi Katha dhun, which explains Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, that is God.
आँखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आँखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, आँखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आँखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल।
Gandhiji's ashrams, many children also used to live, about 400 children. And to the children of the ashram, Gandhiji was not the Mahatma, the great soul, nor was he the political leader of India, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi or Mahatma Gandhi. He was not even the Bapu of the ashram or the father of the ashram. For them, he was merely their friend with whom they could go for a swim in the river, they could splash water on each other, they could eat together, play together, and many a times when there used to be festivities in the ashram and children used to put up plays, Gandhiji used to come and whisper in their ears whether they had kept any role for him as well. So for the children of the ashram, he was first and foremost their friend, a friend with whom they could quarrel without any qualms. After all, it is only a friend with whom one can quarrel without qualms, because he will always stand by. He will always be there for you. So such was the friendship and love that Gandhiji gave to children, because as I had said, he treated them as individuals and respected them as individuals. But when the children grew up and in the Sevagram ashram, when they became adolescents, Gandhi ji had changed. He had become a very strict very hard taskmaster. Every work had to be done with efficiency, sincerity, honesty, and integrity. They had to be very, very punctual. They had to take part in all the common activities of the ashram, which were daily morning and evening prayers, community sanitation, community eating together, and community spinning. Apart from taking part in their educational activities through basic education program, which is Gandhiji's gift to humanity, again called Nai Talim, and get involved in the constructive activities in the villages. So this was the kind of life, this was the kind of love that Gandhiji gave not only to the children but to all the ashram inhabitants. And it went beyond the borders of the ashram and spread across the country and beyond the borders of the country as well. So, though Gandhiji's role and contribution to the political arena are well known, what is less known is his contribution towards health and well being. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed on the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. His interest in health, hygiene, nutrition, and diseases was as great as his interest in politics. He insisted that adopting preventive measures for diseases was better than treatment. He also said that it was important to focus on cleanliness, a controlled diet, and an exercise regimen, and that it was best to avoid overconsumption of medicines, especially those that were not required. He was a firm believer of nature cure and conducted experiments related to diet and fasting from his student days in London. He also believed that it was important to understand what caused diseases and then remove that very cause, rather than falling ill again and then attempting to treat it with excessive medication. Gandhiji was essentially a man of science. He approached problems in a scientific manner. Gandhiji's message to the world on the vital question of health and well being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of the service to God and His creation, which was his mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. His message was simple and easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self control, reduce the wants, follow the tradition, the cultural practices, and the values, follow the environmental credo, and nature cure for living in harmony with nature. Gandhiji was very interested in health and wellness and remained ever vigilant about his own health as well as of others. He said that our lifestyle should be such that it should not let any disease come anywhere near us. And every person is responsible for looking after his or her body, mind, and spirit impeccably. And he advised that in order for keeping physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy, we should have perfect understanding of our bodies, which is made up of the five elements that are found in nature. And that has what been told to us by our ancient seers and sages in India. And these five elements are air, water, fire, earth, and space. For the wellness of our bodies, the balance and harmony between all these five elements is necessary. During the COVID-19 pandemic, enveloping ourselves in the rhythm and forms of nature can be transformative and healing. Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition of India, recommends spending time in nature every day. Doing so allows us to experience the wonderment of this existence with all our senses. Nature allows us to shift our attention beyond the domain of our ego and to recognize that we are inextricably connected to the universe. From the mind body perspective, Gandhiji's standpoint was that health is an optimal integration of body, mind, spirit, soul, and the environment. Environment is our extended body. There is a nice Vedic expression from the ancient texts of India, scriptures of India, which says, as is the atom, so is the universe. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. As is the universal body, so is the cosmic body. As is the universal mind, so is the cosmic mind. Yoga and meditation integrates all components of health, and Gandhiji was a strong believer in nature cure, Ayurveda, and Ashtanga Yoga as well. His experiments on nature cure and all dietetics and health were always on himself. He also advised his friends and disciples to follow these remedies and treated and cured 30,000 patients through nature cure. Gandhiji was the first environmentalist, and with his stunning premonition and knowledge, he had declared that the earth has enough for man's needs, but not for man's greed. Greed will be the main reason for the environmental degradation and the ecological crisis he had predicted almost a century ago. He had also said, and I quote, the earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but on loan from our children. So we have to hand it over to them as it was handed over to us. Last year on 2nd October, the United Nations released the stamps brought out by the UN Postal Department with this quote. Very few people also know that as a couple, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health emergencies and service of the patients during the epidemics. During the Second Anglo-Boer War from 1899 to 1902 and in the Zulu uprising of 1906, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi established the Natal Indian Ambulance Corps, and along with 300 free Indians and 800 Indian indentured labor, he served as stretcher bearers for carrying the wounded soldiers. In the bubonic plague outbreak in Johannesburg in 1904, he and his wife not only rushed to quarantine the patients in an empty godown, which was sanitized and cleaned by them, but treated them through nature cure. Earlier, a native African had come to Gandhiji for seeking help for his condition of leprosy. Gandhiji immediately took him inside, cleaned up his wound nicely with potassium permanganate and water, bandaged him, and kept him at home. And later on, with the help of his friends, he built an hospital and shifted them there. He also built a lot of things for people to be safe and secure. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi returned to India in 1915 at the age of 45 years after spending more or less 20 years in South Africa. In the Spanish influenza pandemic of 1918, Gandhiji opened up his Sabarmati ashram as a quarantine center and treated and served patients through nature cure, provided simple vegetarian diet to boost immunity and maintain physical distancing. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi took care of the families of the patients, looked after their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, gave them correct information, and taught them to be positive through prayer, meditation, and chanting of Ramanama, and to take care of each other during the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. Gandhiji had said on November 10th, 1918, our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past. But today, we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them even in our present broken state of health. That way is the way of self restraint or of imposing a limit on our acts, desires, and wants. In about 1906, Gandhiji wrote a series of articles on health titled Guide to Health in his newspaper Indian Opinion, and later on it was published in the form of a book, which really people liked it very much. And in 1942, in India, when Gandhiji was imprisoned while he was leading the Quit India movement in the Aga Khan Palace jail in Pune, he wrote the book Key to Health, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading him to health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors or Vaidyas, the traditional health practitioners, from day to day. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crises globally. First is the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, which is causing immense physical stress, sickness, death, fear of death, and existential crisis. The second is the serious and long drawn financial crisis, which is also causing physical and mental anguish. And the third is the ecological crisis, which is impacting everyone. We have to look for answers somewhere within ourselves by learning from the life of Gandhiji, who had said, "My life is my message." The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, the nation is affected, and then other communities in other nations in this globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness, that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together as one human family. Wherever we may be living, in whichever country we may be living, whatever color, race, religion we may have, whether we choose to see it or not, we are all brothers and sisters living on the same planet, the planet Earth. And we have only one home, our Mother Earth. The current COVID-19 pandemic is a wake up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of the human existence. We all will have to learn to live with COVID now and in the future as well. Instead of reinventing a new lifestyle, we just have to get inspired from the life of Mahatma Gandhi to make the necessary changes in thoughts, actions, and conduct for coping up physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And this is the future that the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic is pointing out to us if we observe carefully. Many lessons are very clear. and some are still unknown, surrounding us in uncertainty. This uncertainty is causing mental stress, anxiety, existential fear, crisis, fear of extinction and death, and mass psychology of living in depression and grief is pointing out towards this fact in the current pandemic. We are collectively grieving for the loss of our known lifestyle. And we must always remember that we are all together in this. Our ancient sages and seers have always looked upon us as global citizens and said that the world is one family. So, whatever happens in one part of the globe impacts the other people and it causes so much sadness. But if we still return to the normal standard of finding happiness by chasing after money, power, position, lifelong consumerism, then COVID 19 has given us the wake up call. This kind of lifestyle of empty consumerism and mass distractions has only increased the difference between the rich and poor, created the huge carbon footprint, increased the misery of the invisible poor masses. When a crisis makes you feel stressed, meditation and prayer relieve the stress response. Fear and anxiety are forms of stress that become exaggerated when events become uncertain, when you feel a loss of control over the situation, and when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up. The thinking mind reacts to all of these conditions. It always has, even in normal times. But a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very capable of lowering the immune system of our body and causing inflammatory diseases. Decades ago, stress was classified as epidemic of modern life. The Gandhian way of life is the best guide to practicing and coping mechanism that induces relaxation, calmness, inner peace, absence of anxiety, serving the humanity, and remaining positive. Therefore, he comes out as the greatest healer and the wellness guru who comes free of cost during and after the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic. Gandhian principles of freedom from fear and care for all is a perfect prescription in the times of COVID 19 pandemic. Gandhiji's emphasis on healthy lifestyle, empowerment for self-care and care for the community would make perfect sense. So I once again take this opportunity to thank the Embassy of India for hosting Gandhi Katha. My special thanks are to the singers Srimati Swati Bhagat and Sri Deepak Kalra, who accompanied me in singing the hymns, and to Dr. Ravi Chopra, who gave the technical support and gave the presentation. And the Gandhi Katha dhuns or hymns were composed by late Sri Narayan Desai ji, my mentor, and I'm very thankful to all of them. But my special thanks are to all of you who have joined me online today and have given me the most precious gift, the gift of your time. I will recite a peace benediction in Sanskrit for the universal welfare. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let all be happy. Let all be healthy. Let all experience auspiciousness. Let no one be overwhelmed by grief. Om, peace, peace, peace. With Gandhiji's blessings, who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light, I will end today's Gandhi Katha with the Gandhi Katha hymn in Hindi, Shubha Mangal Ho. May there be auspicious good. May there be good. May the earth be auspicious. May the sky be auspicious. May every particle on earth be auspicious.
Stay